How does a person change when they experience trauma? You might be able to spot some of the signs, especially if you or someone you know has survived a traumatic event. But everyone deals with trauma differently, don't they? In his book titled The Body Keeps the Score, author and psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk delves into the advancements made in the diagnosis and treatment of trauma, including the emergence of new technologies, research, and science. Much like the word anxiety, trauma has historically been used as a vague term linked to a range of symptoms and treatments. However, van der Kolk reveals that our understanding of trauma is changing and has become more definite in recent years, largely thanks to the effects it leaves on a victim's mind and body, combined with our increasing ability to interpret and understand those signs. We're going to explore the conclusions van der Kolk makes, and by the end of this video, you too will be able to see how when it comes to trauma, the body keeps the score. Explaining trauma. In order to fully understand trauma and its effects, we need to be aware of three things. Firstly, there are an endless number of circumstances that can result in trauma, from one-time events like a car accident to ongoing experiences like bullying or wartime combat. Secondly, trauma can lead to a variety of symptoms such as nightmares, hallucinations, rage, and other mental issues. In the past, up until a few decades ago, as van der Kolk writes, patients with these symptoms were often misdiagnosed as suffering from things like depression, mood disorders, schizophrenia, etc. Thirdly, the effects of trauma not only live on in the mind of a sufferer, but can also cause a rewiring of the brain that leads to hypervigilance and hyperarousal. The slightest hint of a threat can often send trauma sufferers into a fight-or-flight response, triggering stress hormones that flood their bodies and keep them in a state of hyperarousal long after the perceived threat is gone. Over time, this hypervigilance and hyperarousal cause physical ailments and hamper trauma sufferers' ability to function emotionally and socially. Essentially, if left untreated, the effects of trauma can continue to build like a snowball effect, further damaging the mind, brain, and body. Trauma's impact on the mind. The mental and emotional damage suffered by survivors can severely hinder how they interact with the world around them. For instance, they often have trouble trusting other people and tend to isolate themselves as a defense mechanism. They can feel haunted and consumed by shame, blaming themselves for not acting differently during a traumatic event, and focusing on their own shortcomings rather than that of others who caused them harm. What's more, trauma survivors get used to these emotions and resign themselves to their circumstances, developing a state of learned helplessness in which they feel unable to do anything about it. If a survivor suffers from flashbacks, this compounds the feeling of helplessness and keeps reminding them of the past, so they're never able to be fully engaged in the present. It's heartbreaking. Trauma's impact on the brain. In addition to the emotional response, parts of a survivor's brain can become so overwhelmed that they either switch off or go into overdrive. Brain scans have revealed that when trauma survivors experience flashbacks, their brains react as if the actual trauma were happening at that very moment. Meanwhile, the most primitive parts of the brain, the so-called reptilian brain and the mammalian brain, keep them in a constant state of alert, so they go through life constantly jumping in response to non-threats. Trauma's impact on the body. Since a person's mind and body are inextricably linked, it should come as little surprise that emotional damage can lead to physical damage. Think of it this way. When you're happy, you smile. When you're sad, you frown. Your body also releases hormones according to how you're feeling. Dopamine for joy, cortisol for stress, and so on. Trauma causes intense emotions and physical sensations that are so overwhelming that survivors cope by suppressing both their emotions and physical reactions. When you suppress or can't understand what your physical sensations are telling you, the body finds other ways to demand your attention. For this reason, many trauma survivors develop psychosomatic issues, physical ailments that have no physical cause, such as migraines, neck and back pain, asthma, digestive issues, irritable bowel syndrome, and chronic fatigue. Your body keeps the score. Childhood sources of trauma. When we are at our most vulnerable stage of life, as babies, we are at the mercy of others and must rely on them for basic needs like food, safety, and comfort. The extent to which your caregiver provides them determines how well you'll take care of these needs for yourself later in life. The more responsive and attentive they are to you, the more responsive and attentive you are likely to be to others. This is because attachment and childhood experiences shape your inner maps of the world. As an adult, your inner map determines what you consider normal and familiar, how you interpret situations, and how you engage with the people and world around you. Inner maps are generally consistent throughout life, but they can be changed, be it positively through profound experiences or negatively by trauma and neglect. Treatment approaches for the mind, brain, and body. The good news is that as our understanding of trauma develops, so too does effective treatment. In modern psychiatry, there is a heightened focus on allowing sufferers to regain control of their thoughts, feelings, and body. Generally, this involves 4 steps. Step 1 involves learning how to be calm and focused. Step 2 is finding a way to stay calm in the face of sensations like images, sounds, and smells that are associated with your trauma. Step 3 is learning to be present and to engage with the people around you. And step 4 is being truthful with yourself by recognizing the ways you adapted to survive during and after your trauma. What's more, there are 3 general approaches to modern treatment. Firstly, there's the top-down approach. This primarily involves talking it out, connecting with other people, and opening up about the traumatic memories and their present-day effects. Acknowledging the trauma and the emotions it triggers can relieve a survivor from the immense energy required to suppress those emotions. Plus, it allows them to manage their emotions more effectively. However, talk therapy as a sole form of treatment is often inadequate because it causes sufferers to revisit their trauma. They may also struggle to articulate what happened to them and how it makes them feel, because their brains didn't process the event as a coherent narrative, but rather as a collection of fragmented sensations. So, in addition to talk therapy, the top-down approach includes mindful breathing exercises, mindful self-awareness, group activities, encouraging trusting relationships, and physical therapy such as massages or the Feldenkrais method, an intervention designed to help people reconnect with their bodies and learn ways to move with greater efficiency. The second form of treatment is medication. Altering one's brain chemistry can help to alleviate some of the symptoms of trauma, such as using prescription drugs to inhibit a survivor's overactive internal alarm systems. However, medication should not be seen as a replacement for therapy. Rather, it should be used to increase the chances of therapy being successful. After all, medication alone does not address the root cause of a trauma victim's problems, but it can certainly help them out on the road to recovery. Third is the bottom-up approach, which is all about seeking physical experiences that connect the body and mind to counteract feelings of helplessness, rage, and emotional collapse that plague trauma survivors. Activities such as yoga teach people to listen and respond to their bodies, and to notice how emotions can be connected to certain physical sensations. Psychomotor therapy uses body awareness and physical expressions, activating the right hemisphere of the brain, the same hemisphere where trauma is also largely imprinted. Other bodily treatments, such as heart rate variability, known as HRV, neurofeedback, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, are all aimed at getting trauma survivors to understand their bodies, to notice irregularities so they can start changing them for the better. Summary. For all the points raised in Bessel van der Kolk's book and the scientific advances he highlights, ultimately, there is still no general consensus regarding trauma or the best way to treat it. Differing schools of thought still linger within the psychiatric community, with some professionals heavily favoring medication, while others advocate for more talking and behavioral therapy. The general public still seems to associate trauma with cases like PTSD in war veterans, survivors of physical abuse, and those who have experienced catastrophic events such as terrorist attacks. However, the reality is that almost everyone is susceptible to experiencing trauma of some kind, or knows someone who has, whether from a personal tragedy, an accident, or whatever the case may be. The only things we can be sure of are that trauma has a detrimental effect on the minds of its victims, and that the body keeps the score. We must keep learning and understanding so that we can continue to treat trauma as best we can. Reading Bessel van der Kolk's book is definitely a good start, though. Thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a comment down below, leave a like on the video if you found it useful, and subscribe for more book summaries and analyses. See you again next time.